6:35 a.m., Chesapeake, Virginia. 12 federal agents moved in a tight stack along the exterior wall of a beige colonial on Harbour Mist Drive. Body armor, HK-416s at low ready, flashlights off. The lead agent, FBI SWAT, pressed a gloved hand flat against the front door and looked back at the team. One nod. The breaching ram came forward, retention comp point, 030 hook resolution Ts at the same moment, 4 miles north. A second team was cutting the padlock off a storage facility in Portsmouth. And in downtown Chesapeake, a third group of NCIS agents was already inside the lobby of Tidewater Signals Integration LC, badges out, standing in front of a very confused overnight security guard. 3 locations, 3 simultaneous operations, 2 federal agencies, and one man at the center of it all, a United States Navy Reserve commander who had spent the last 17 months feeding the encryption architecture of America's destroyer fleet to an Iranian intelligence network operating out of Dubai. This is how it ended. But to understand what happened that morning in June 2026, you have to go back to a Friday night in late October 2025, a classified network in Norfolk, and 14 gigabytes of data that were never supposed to leave the building. Tidewater Signals Integration LLC was incorporated in 2019 in Chesapeake, Virginia, a mid-sized defense subcontractor in the dense cluster of private firms that orbit Naval Station Norfolk, the largest naval installation on the planet. The company held a secret-level facility clearance issued by the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, DCSA, and maintained 3 active subcontracts related to communication system upgrades aboard Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the workhorse of the U.S. surface fleet. 31 employees, clean audit history, no flags. The CEO was Commander Daniel Marsh, retired designation, though he'd served 18 years in the Naval Reserve as a communications systems officer before moving to the private sector. In the Hampton Roads defense community, Marsh was known, not famous, known. The kind of man who showed up to Navy League events, shook the right hands, chaired a subcommittee on frequency management at a defense contractor forum in October 2024. His company had a government contract renewal rate of 100%. His clearance had been renewed without incident. On the surface, Tidewater Signals Integration was exactly what it appeared to be. Retention comp point. Stakes bend. The anomaly appeared on October 24, 2025, a Friday, 10:47 p.m. An automated audit system running on a classified network segment monitored by NCIS Cyberfield Office Norfolk flagged after-hours data transfer. The source, a Tidewater-issued laptop, authenticated under Daniel Marsh's user credentials, physically connected to the company's secure workstation cluster at their Chesapeake facility. The destination, an external SSD connected via USB. Transfer size, 14.2 gigabytes. 14 gigabytes is not a trivial number on a classified network. For context, the complete communication configuration package for a single Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. Frequency hop schedules, encryption key sets, IFF handshake timing data, runs roughly 1.8 to 2.4 gigabytes depending on the deployment variant. 14 gigabytes, transferred on a Friday night, 2 days before USS Bulkeley was scheduled to depart Naval Station Norfolk for the Gulf. The system flagged it. A duty analyst reviewed it at 11:22 p.m. The analyst escalated at 11:51 p.m. The following Monday morning, an NCIS counterintelligence investigator called Marsh's security support officer, the individual responsible for overseeing classified information handling at Tidewater. The SSO asked Marsh directly, what was the transfer? Marsh's answer was immediate and calm. A routine backup, he said. He was copying project archives to a personal SSD before a scheduled workstation. Migration, he'd done it before. He'd submit the documentation to the SSO the following week. The SSO accepted the explanation. The NCS investigator did not. The explanation was technically possible. It was procedurally irregular. Personal SSDs are not an authorized backup medium on classified networks, but not impossible. A reprimand, perhaps. An administrative flag in Marsh's file. The kind of thing that happens in contractor environments when security culture is good but not perfect. Except for one detail the NCIS investigator had already noticed before the phone call with the SSO. The transfer had occurred 2 hours after the last other employee badged out of the facility, at a workstation that should have been in a locked secure room. On a Friday night, using credentials that Marsh had authenticated remotely, from a location the system logged as a Virginia Beach hotel 12 miles away. Daniel Marsh was not in the building when the transfer occurred. Someone with his credentials was. NCS Counterintelligence opened a formal case on October 28, 2025. They brought in FBI Norfolk's Counterintelligence Squad by the first week of November. What followed was 9 weeks of methodical surveillance and signals intelligence work in the Hampton Roads area, and almost nobody outside. The two agencies knew it was happening. I spent time going through what became public in the federal charging documents, and one detail kept nagging at me: how long this pipeline had already been running by the time that October flag appeared. The indictment alleges the first transmission of classified material occurred in May 2025. By the time NCIS noticed the anomaly, Marsh had already completed at least 11 prior transfers over 6 months. 14 gigabytes was not the beginning. It may not even have been the largest single transmission. The wiretap order was approved in early November 2025. Physical surveillance began simultaneously, two-person teams rotating at 12-hour intervals, covering Marsh's residence in Chesapeake, his office, and a Virginia Beach hotel that appeared repeatedly in his phone location data. The hotel connection resolved quickly. Marsh was meeting a man who traveled to Virginia Beach once every 4 to 6 weeks from Washington, Dulles. International arrivals, business class, traveling on a UAE-registered business visa under the name of a logistics consulting firm registered in Dubai. The man's name, as it appears in federal documents, was redacted. Agents internally referred to him as the handler. The handler would check into the hotel on a Thursday evening. Marsh would arrive separately on Friday afternoon. They would meet once, typically in the hotel bar or an adjacent restaurant, for between 45 minutes and 2 hours. Then the handler would check out and fly back through Dulles the following morning. The courier mechanism was identified during the fourth surveillance window in late November 2025. The SSD, a Faraday-shielded case, the kind commercially available and used legitimately by field technicians to prevent accidental wireless transmission from sensitive hardware. Marsh brought it to the hotel in a gym bag. He left without it. The handler left with it. 14 gigabytes per transfer, encrypted. Walked out of the country inside a Faraday case in a carry-on bag. What's most striking about this case isn't the volume of data Marsh exfiltrated. It's how mundane the transfer mechanism was. No sophisticated dead drops, no covert digital channels, a USB drive, and a hotel lobby. One of the worst intelligence breaches in Hampton Roads in decades was moving through the same hotel bar where Navy officers celebrated retirements. Retention cut point: 50% mid-roll hook. By December 2025, investigators had identified what the data contained. The encryption keys and frequency hop schedules for destroyer communication systems were one component. The second, and this is the detail that pushed the case from a serious counterintelligence matter to a national security emergency, was IFF, handshake timing data. IFF stands for Identification Friend or Foe. It's the system that lets military assets recognize each other in a combat environment. The specific timing and handshake protocols for the IFF systems aboard Arleigh Burke destroyers operating in the Strait of Hormuz were part of what Marsh had transferred. 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers were operating under the Hormuz blockade protocols announced in spring 2026. If an adversary had current IFF handshake timing, they would know the precise electronic signature that identifies a U.S. destroyer as friendly, and they would know exactly when and how to interrogate or spoof that signal. The operational implications were serious enough that the case was briefed to senior leadership at Naval Intelligence and the FBI's Counterterrorism Division. The question investigators faced was not whether to arrest Marsh, the evidence was already sufficient, but how to do it in a way that let them confirm the full scope of what had been transmitted and identify every node in the network. That decision created its own complication. In early January 2026, the surveillance team monitoring the Virginia Beach hotel flagged a change in pattern. The handler had shortened his visit cycle, arriving every 3 weeks instead of every 4 to 6. The volume appeared to be increasing. Marsh had also begun making calls from a prepaid burner phone, purchased in cash at a convenience store in Norfolk, to a number that routed through a commercial VoIP service with servers registered in Cyprus. Investigators faced a direct choice: move on Marsh immediately, with the evidence already in hand, or wait, continue surveillance, and try to map additional nodes in the network, at the risk that another transfer would occur and more data would leave the country. Here's the take that'll probably get us some pushback. The 9-week surveillance period was the right call operationally, but it came at a real cost. At least 2 additional transfers occurred between the case opening and the arrest. That's classified material that left the country while investigators were building their case. The argument for waiting to identify the full network is legally and tactically sound, but it means someone made a deliberate decision to allow known espionage to continue. The oversight structures that approved that decision should be a matter of public record, and they aren't. The breakthrough came in mid-February 2026. A courier swap, different from the SSD handoffs, was observed at the Virginia Beach Hotel during what would later be identified as an emergency contact protocol. The handler arrived without his usual advance booking. He met Marsh in the parking structure, not the lobby. The exchange lasted 11 minutes. When the handler left, surveillance teams followed him to Dulles. He boarded a flight to Dubai. What he carried out of that parking structure was not an SSD, it was a sealed envelope. Investigators, operating under a Title III warrant, had placed a tracking device on the handler's vehicle. The envelope was recovered through means that remain sealed in the case file and found to contain handwritten notes, specific, technical, in a format consistent with a signals intelligence summary. Marsh had written it by hand, no digital trail. The decision to move was made in March 2026. Execution was set for June 9th, a date chosen based on the departure schedules of the 3 destroyers already at sea, and a final confirmation window needed to synchronize the arrest with an emergency comms rekey operation the Navy had quietly prepared. What do you think? Does the intelligence community have an obligation to disclose to the public when they allow known espionage to continue during an active investigation? Drop your answer in the comments. This one doesn't have a clean answer. The arrest operation involved 43 personnel across FBI, NCIS, and support elements from the Naval Criminal Investigative Services Special Investigations Unit. 3 simultaneous entry operations. A 4th team at Norfolk International Airport as a contingency if Marsh attempted to move. The tactical element at Harbour Mist Drive reached the front door at 6:35 a.m. The breaching ram made contact at 6:36. Marsh was found in the kitchen. He was dressed. A go bag sat on the kitchen counter, a black duffel containing a passport, $11,000 in cash, and a second burner phone that had received an incoming call at 6:29 a.m., 6 minutes before entry. The call had come from a number registered to a prepaid SIM purchased in the UAE. Someone had tipped him off. He hadn't moved anyway, whether from shock, resignation, or a calculation that running would make things worse. Marsh was standing in his kitchen when the door came open. He did not resist. He did not speak. He was handcuffed and walked to a federal vehicle in under 90 seconds. At the Tidewater facility, ANS agents had entered the lobby at 6:35 a.m., simultaneous with the residential breach. The overnight security guard was separated from the building's communication systems before he could make a call. The guard was not a subject of the investigation and was released after a 2-hour interview. Inside the facility, agents worked through a pre-planned search protocol, targeting 3 specific server rooms, 2 individual workstations, and the office of Tidewater's systems engineer, a man named Aaron Keach, 38, who was arrested at his own home in Virginia Beach at 6:41 a.m. by a separate NCS team. Keach had been Marsh's technical collaborator. The indictment alleges he handled the compression and packaging of the classified data before each transfer, a step that required detailed knowledge of the file structures involved and active participation in the exfiltration process. The Portsmouth storage unit, Unit 147 at a commercial facility on Prentice Avenue, was breached at 6:36 a.m. The lock had been replaced with a high-security model 3 weeks before the arrest. A detail flagged during surveillance, but 1 investigators couldn't act on without tipping the operation. The breach team used a hydraulic cutter. Inside, a metal cabinet padlocked. Inside the cabinet, the Faraday-shielded case. 6 SSDs, factory-wiped but not overridden. Forensic recovery would later extract partial datasets from 4 of them. $284,000 in bundled cash in vacuum-sealed bags, and a prepaid laptop never connected to any network, powered off, containing a single encrypted file that investigators were still working to decrypt as of the time the charges were filed. One detail that stuck with me going through the case file, the $284,000 in cash. At the alleged rate of payment, estimates in the charging documents suggest somewhere between $18,000 and $24. 0 per successful transfer. That figure represents roughly 12 to 15 completed payments. The indictment alleges at least 11 transfers before investigators opened the case, plus additional transfers during the surveillance period. The math is consistent, which means the cash in that storage unit may represent almost the entire operational payment history. He didn't spend it. He stored it, vacuum-sealed, in a Faraday case, alongside the drives. Draw your own conclusions about what that suggests about his state of mind. 3 burner phones were recovered across the 3 locations. All 3 showed active communication links to the Dubai cutout. One contained a messaging application, end-to-end encrypted, server infrastructure registered in the Seychelles, with a partial conversation thread. The content of that thread is under seal. By 7:15 a.m. on June 9, 2026, both Marsh and Keech were in federal custody. Both were transported to the federal courthouse in Norfolk. Both were held without bail pending arraignment on charges under the Espionage Act, specifically 18 U.S.C. paragraph 794, transmission of national defense information to a foreign government, with additional counts related to conspiracy and obstruction. At approximately 8:00 a.m., three Arleigh Burke-class destroyers operating under Hormuz protocols received an emergency communication rekey order. The operation, pre-staged by Navy communications specialists working in coordination with the investigation, took 4 hours to complete across all three vessels. During that window, the ships maintained reduced communication posture. None were in active engagement situations. The rekey was completed without incident. Retention count point. Last 60s payoff plus open loop. What remains open in this case is the question of how far the network extended beyond Marsh and Keech. The handler has not been publicly identified. He was in Dubai when the arrests occurred. There is no extradition treaty between the United States and the UAE that would cover espionage charges under the current diplomatic framework. His name, nationality, and the specific Iranian intelligence directorate he allegedly served remain sealed in the classified annex of the indictment. The encrypted file on the storage unit laptop has not been cracked as of the date the charges were filed. Investigators believe it may contain a contact list or operational log, but that remains speculation until the decryption is complete. And the prepaid SIM that called Marsh's burner phone at 6:29 a.m., 6 minutes before the door came in, was purchased in a Dubai airport convenience store 4 days before the arrest. Whoever placed that call knew the operation was moving. The source of that leak has not been identified. Looking back, what this case tells us about the state of defense contractor security is uncomfortable. Tidewater Signals integration passed every audit it was ever given. Marsh held a secret-level clearance renewed without incident. The automated flag that started this entire investigation was not a human analyst noticing something wrong. It was a system trigger, a data volume threshold at an odd hour. Without that specific algorithmic tripwire positioned on that classified network segment, the October transfer likely goes undetected, and so does the next one, and the one after that. The demand for classified U.S. naval communications data doesn't disappear when one pipeline is shut down. It adjusts. It finds the next access point, the next contractor, the next Friday night after everyone else has gone home. Marsh and Keech face maximum sentences of life imprisonment under the Espionage Act charges. Federal prosecutors have indicated they intend to seek the full penalty given the national security implications of the specific data transmitted. Trial is expected no earlier than spring 2027. The Tidewater facility was placed under DCSA receivership the morning of the arrests. Its 31 employees, none of whom, other than Keech, have been implicated, were placed on administrative leave pending an internal review of all classified material handled by the company over the previous 24 months. That review is ongoing. If you've been following the broader pattern of defense contractor espionage cases this year, or if this is your first, subscribe to the channel. The Hormuz story doesn't end here. There are adjacent angles we're still tracking, and we won't miss what comes next. The handler is still in Dubai. The laptop file is still encrypted. And somewhere in the chain between a Chesapeake subdivision and an Iranian intelligence cutout, there are nodes that investigators haven't publicly confirmed they've identified. The pipeline is down. The demand that created it is unchanged.